Okay, so let's begin. Are there questions from yesterday? Okay, so if not, let me start. So yesterday we introduced two notions, okay, and let me write it again. Okay. So, and I'll now write it in a somewhat general form. So let's suppose that we are at a given lambda, or given lambda, okay, which you can also call the k-scale factor. We introduce the notion of two quantities. One is the age of the universe at that time. So yesterday we calculated the age at age today, okay, then namely at lambda equal to 1. But in general, if somebody gives you a value of lambda, we can write down the formula for the age. And let me write this formula. So this is H0 inverse, and then integral from 0 to lambda. I'll use this variable u, okay, instead of lambda prime that we used yesterday. So omega m u inverse plus omega r u to the minus 2 plus omega lambda u square to the power minus half. And the second quantity was the co-moving horizon. Horizon RH, which is H0 inverse. And then the same thing.
Sir, when you are calculating like co-moving horizon or co-moving distances, so these are all at a given time slice, right?
Yes, that's right.
But if it is at a given time slice, but you integrate from 0 to lambda, but 0 to lambda corresponds to these are two different times.
Yes, of course. So this is a co-moving horizon, right? That means that if we start at r equal to 0 at the time of Big Bang, what r will it reach at time when the scale factor is lambda?
Yes.
Right? So that's the value of r.
Yes.
So that will be the co-moving distance between the origin, where the light started, and where we are measuring it.
But we are assuming that the two events are at the same time, right? We are assuming
We are not assuming that two events are at the same time, right? So, okay, let's say suppose the light originates at r equal to 0, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that r equal to 0, okay, in the co-moving coordinate system will remain fixed at r equal to 0.
Yes.
Okay, and so at a time, okay, when the scale factor reaches a point lambda, we have 2 points. Okay, the origin where it would have started, right, the r equal to 0 point.
Yes.
And the r equal to rh point. Right? Both at the same time slice at lambda.
Okay.
Even though the event happened at an earlier time. Because you have this preferred coordinate system, right? The co-moving coordinate system. It makes sense to say that a point is at r equal to 0, right? Both at t equal to 0 as well as for any later time t. Yeah, that's what you are doing. That we have the origin, right? Which the actual the light started at an earlier time, right? But that point remains in the co-moving coordinate system. And is the distance from that point that you are measuring.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, and finally, let me write down the physical horizon. Which is dh, okay, which is essentially RH times lambda. So today we are going to study this in a little more detail, okay, and we'll study this in various domains, okay, various regimes. Okay. So let's start from radiation dominated. Okay, this is the easiest because nothing happened earlier than this. Okay, at least that's what we are assuming at present. So in the radiation dominated era, okay, omega r dominates. Okay, so you are going to ignore the other terms. Okay. So this gives T as H naught inverse times integral 0 to lambda du, and then omega r to the power minus half times u, okay, because there's u to the minus 2. So this gives you H naught inverse omega r to the minus half and then lambda square by 2. On the other hand, RH will be given by H naught inverse and then integral 0 to lambda du u inverse times the same thing, omega r to the minus half times u. Okay. So that's H naught inverse omega r to the minus half times lambda, right? Because this is just integral du, so that gives you lambda. And this means that the physical horizon dh is given by lambda times rh, which is H naught inverse omega r to the half times lambda square, and that is twice the age of the universe at that time. Okay. So this suggests that in time t, okay, since the Big Bang, okay, a light ray, okay, traveled a distance 2t. Okay, this is a distance that the light ray has traveled from the origin to the point of observation at time t. Okay. And this may seem surprising at the beginning because it tells us that light actually is traveling at a speed that's faster than that of light, right? Because normally you are in flat space time, you are familiar with the fact that the light in time t, the light travels a distance t, right? In the unit when c has been set equal to 1. Okay. Here we see that at time t, in time t, light travels a distance 2t. Okay. And the reason that this is not in conflict with anything else, any laws of relativity, okay, is simply because here the universe is getting stretched. Okay. So this apparent speed of light, right, which is 2 in this unit, okay, is simply due to the stretching of the universe. Okay, this still the rule of special relativity that you cannot send signal faster than light, that still remains. Okay, it's just that in this coordinate system and in this description, light seems to travel at a speed of 2 instead of, even though you have set c equal to 1. Is this okay? Are there questions on this? Okay, so let me proceed. Now we consider the case of matter dominated universe. So in this regime, okay, strictly speaking, we have to keep track of what happened earlier, okay, because matter domination comes after radiation domination. Okay. So let's do that at least at a level of an order of magnitude. So I'll write T as H naught inverse times the sum of two terms. Okay. The total age at that time will be the age that comes from the radiation dominated part. Okay. And then the contribution to the age that comes from the matter dominated part. Okay. So we'll write this as, sorry, this is the H naught inverse. So we'll write this as integral 0 to lambda eq. Okay, this is the time when radiation and matter energy densities are equal. So in this part, I'll use the fact that this is omega to the minus half times du times u plus lambda eq to lambda. Here I'll write as du omega m to the minus half, and the result, this is u to the half. Okay, the u to the half basically comes, you can see from here that in the matter dominated phase, it's u to the u inverse to the power minus half, that's u to the half. Now clearly this is not quite correct, right? Because what I have assumed here is that as long as lambda is smaller than the u is smaller than lambda eq, we can use the radiation dominated formula, but that's of course only true when u is much smaller than lambda eq. Similarly, here you have assumed that as long as u is larger than lambda eq, we can use the matter dominated formula, but that clearly happens when u is much larger than lambda eq. But we'll soon argue that the errors actually, even though, so here there's an error of order 1, here there's an error of order 1 from the lower limit, but we'll soon argue that that error is irrelevant for large enough lambda. Okay, so let's see how that comes about. So this is given by H0 inverse times, so this gives you omega r to the power minus half, and then half lambda eq square, and here you get omega m to the minus half. So this gives you u to the 3 half, so 2/3 of u to the 3 half, so 2/3, and then lambda to the 3 half minus lambda eq to the power 3 half. And now we are going to use the fact that lambda eq is omega r over omega m. That's when the two things become equal. So I can write omega r as omega m times lambda eq. And as a result, this term over here becomes omega m to the minus half times lambda eq to the power 3 half. Okay. So what we see is that this term, okay, is of the same order as this term. Okay, omega m to the minus half times lambda equal to the 3 half up to these factors of 2/3 and half. Okay. But the important point is that this term, of course, is much smaller than this when lambda is much larger than lambda equal. Okay. So well into the matter dominated era, okay, for lambda much larger than lambda eq, okay, we can essentially ignore these terms, okay, and we get T as H naught inverse times 2/3 omega m to the minus half times lambda to the 3 half. Is this clear? This is okay. So those errors can be, these are order of magnitude estimates, the lower limit here as well as this one. Okay, but those order of magnitude estimates are irrelevant because this term is much larger than these ones. Okay, so let's use the same kind of philosophy to calculate RH. Sorry, RH. Let's first do RH first. The co-moving horizon. Okay. So this is H naught inverse. Again, we write this as integral 0 to lambda eq omega r to the minus half. This time it's going to be du plus integral lambda eq lambda du omega m to the minus half, and this will be u to the minus half. So that's H naught inverse times, so this gives you omega r to the minus half times lambda AQ, omega r to the minus half times lambda AQ, plus this gives you omega, this gives you, let's see, 2, next line, plus 2 omega m to the minus half, and then we get lambda to the half minus lambda AQ to the half. So lambda to the power half minus lambda EQ to the power half. Okay, close the bracket over here. So this again, one can show using this relation, the same relation. This one over here. Okay. That this term is of the same order as this term, the second term. Okay. But both of these are small compared to the lambda to the half term, for lambda are much larger than lambda AQ. Okay. So this I can write as 2 H naught inverse omega m to the power minus half and lambda to the power half. Is this clear? Okay. So this can be used to calculate DH, which is lambda RH. So this is 2 H naught inverse omega m to the minus half lambda to the 3 half. Okay. And we see that we get by compare, so compare this with this one over here. Okay. This factor is the same, omega to m to the minus half lambda to the 3 half. Okay. So this gives you DH is 3t. So apparently light travels at thrice the speed of light, right? Because it's like in the c equal to 1 unit, in time t, the light has traveled a distance of 3t. Okay. But again, of course, that's perfectly consistent with relativity because the universe is stretching. Okay, and part of this comes because of the stretching of the universe. Okay. But this formula will be useful to keep in mind. Are there questions? Okay, so finally, let me do the cosmological constant dominated part. That's the third case. Okay. So here, of course, the omega lambda dominates. Okay. So we get T. Okay. So now let me write this as T0. Okay, that's today's time. Okay. This includes partly contribution from radiation dominated era, partly from the matter dominated era, okay, and partly from the era when matter and cosmological constants are of the same order. Okay. And then H naught inverse integral T0 to lambda, sorry, not T0, because you are doing the integration from lambda. So 1, lambda is 1 today. So 1 to lambda du times omega lambda to the power minus half u inverse. So that gives you T0 plus H0 inverse omega lambda to the minus half. And this is log of lambda. Log of lambda. Okay. And similarly, RH is RH today. RH at T0 plus H naught inverse integral 1 to lambda du omega lambda to the minus half u to the minus 2. So this gives you RH at T0 plus H0 inverse, and then omega lambda to the minus half. This u to the minus 2 gives you 1 minus 1 over lambda. Okay. Now here you would notice that there is a slight difference from what we had earlier, okay, for the matter and radiation geometry data. Namely, the contribution from the upper limit of integration, in fact, is becoming small. Okay. So for large lambda, this is something we had seen yesterday also. For large lambda, this approaches RH at T naught plus H naught inverse omega lambda to the minus half. Okay. So this whole thing of order H naught inverse. Okay. But here you have to now keep in mind, okay, that this calculation is approximate. Okay. RH of T naught, of course, is whatever it is. Okay. But here, for example, you have made an approximation because you are assuming that as soon as lambda becomes larger than 1, okay, we can ignore the matter term relate to the cosmological constant. That's true only at a level of order 1. Right. So this integral should really be changed. Okay. And so this part one should really calculate numerically. And this is what we had done yesterday, right? I mean, we did calculate both of these, okay, numerically. So let me see if I can find that. So the two terms, right? Yeah, here it is. Okay. So one of them was 1.12 times H naught inverse. Okay, that's the integral from lambda equal to 1 to infinity, or u equal to 1 to infinity. Okay. And the other one was about 3. Other one was here. Okay. That 3.29 times H naught inverse. That's the integral from 0 to 1. Okay, so the sum of these two is roughly about 3.5 or 3.4 times H naught inverse, and that's the result. Okay, so this part one can do explicitly numerically and see what result one gets. Okay, so it's of order H naught inverse, but the actual multiple you have to find by doing numerically, right? And what you saw in the previous slide is like 3.4. 3.4 or 4.4, sorry. Okay. Let's look at this once more. Okay, it's the sum of these two. Yeah, so roughly 4.4. Okay, so from this we can also calculate DH, okay, which is RH times lambda. Okay, and so this is roughly H naught inverse times 4.4 times lambda. Okay, so this grows quite rapidly compared to the time, as you can see. Okay, and that again is because of the stretching of the universe. Okay, that the rapid stretching, okay, here makes the ratio. See, earlier the ratio was finite. Okay, for radiation dominated case, the ratio was 2. For the matter dominated case, it was 3. Okay, but we see that for the cosmological constant dominated case, the ratio of dH to T, okay, actually goes to infinity. Okay, so it basically means that the most of the spreading of the light signal, okay, is happening due to the stretching of the universe. Okay, are there questions? Okay, so if not, let me turn to a different topic, and that's the history of temperature. So today, the CMB temperature, cosmic microwave background temperature, is let's call it T naught, okay, which is roughly 2.73 Kelvin. And now one can ask, what was it earlier? So first, one can make a crude analysis. And that is that at temperature T, black body radiation energy density is kT to the 4. Okay. On the other hand, we know that at this, when the scale factor was lambda, the temperature, the energy density, the radiation energy density is given by omega r over lambda to the 4. So by comparing these, we see that T is some constant over lambda. And this constant, of course, can be easily fixed because at lambda equal to 1, this is just T naught. So this is T naught over lambda. Okay. So just from the analysis of the energy density, one can say that the temperature earlier, okay, was higher. Okay, it's scaled by a factor of lambda. Okay. But one can actually do better. Okay, and that's what we will try to do now. So for this, let's look at the Planck distribution formula. Okay, because we want to find the distribution earlier. So let's look at the Planck distribution formula. So let me remind you that the Planck distribution formula, what this gives is the total energy density of radiation carried by photons of frequency between nu and nu plus d nu. Okay. And the formula takes this form. So P of nu, d nu, is given by 8 pi, right, h nu cube d nu over e to the power h nu by kBt minus 1, okay, where h here is 2 pi h bar, okay, or h bar is h over 2 pi. Okay. So this, what this gives us is that the energy density of radiation in the frequency range, in the nu and nu plus d nu. Okay. So let's consider today photon in the CMB. Okay. So today the distribution, okay, so nu naught, so let's suppose nu naught is the frequency of today's photon. Then we have that P nu naught, d nu naught will be given by the same formula, 8 pi h nu naught cube d nu naught over e to the power h nu naught over kBt minus 1. Now, we also have seen earlier that a photon of frequency nu naught today, of frequency nu naught today, had frequency nu naught over lambda earlier. So this is a redshift, right? Earlier, the photon frequency was higher. Okay, so what we are seeing today as photons of frequency nu naught, okay, actually started its life as a photon of frequency nu naught over lambda when the scale factor was lambda. Okay, and this is true for any lambda. Okay, it doesn't have to actually originate at lambda. If today it has frequency nu naught, then at any earlier time, okay, it would have had frequency nu naught over lambda. Okay. So what we are going to do is to use this relation between nu naught and nu. Okay. So let's call this nu. Okay, so let's call this nu. Okay. So we are going to exploit this relationship between nu naught and nu, okay, to find out, okay, what would have been the energy density of radiation, okay, carried by photons that have that range between nu and nu plus d nu. Okay. So is this question clear? Are there questions? Okay, so given that today we have black body radiation of temperature T, this implies that when the scale factor was lambda, the energy density of photons in the range nu plus d nu was given by the following formula. This was given by 1 over lambda to the 4. Okay, 1 over lambda to the 4 because the energy density is of radiation is scaled by 1 over lambda to the 4, okay, times p nu naught d nu naught, okay, where nu naught is lambda times nu. Right? Because we saw that formula earlier. Let me show you. The relationship between nu and nu naught, okay, was the nu naught over lambda is equal to nu. Okay, that's what we are using here. Okay. So if at an early time we consider photons of energy nu, okay, they would have had energy nu naught today. Okay. So let me write this 1 over lambda to the 4 p nu naught d nu naught I wrote down earlier, but let me write it again. So 8 pi h nu naught cube d nu naught divided by e to the power h nu naught over kb t naught minus 1. Okay. And now using this formula, okay, we get 1 over lambda cube, lambda to the 4, 8 pi h, and then lambda to the 4 nu cube d nu. Okay, I'm using nu naught equal to lambda nu. And here e to the power h lambda nu, h nu lambda over kb t naught minus 1. Okay. So now you see that this lambda to the 4 cancels this lambda to the 4. Okay. And what you are left with, you can recognize, okay, this formula over here you can recognize by comparing with the general black body distribution formula. here you see the general black body distribution formula at temperature T is given here. Okay. And what we see is that the distribution that we are seeing in the early universe is black body distribution. Okay. This is the black body distribution. Black body radiation formula. But the temperature has changed. Okay. T is given by T naught over lambda. Right? Because you have this lambda over T naught, otherwise the formula is the same. Right? So we identify lambda over T naught as 1 over T. Right? That gives you T equal to T naught over lambda. Okay. So this is telling us that not only that the total energy density, okay, based on the total energy density, okay, we can say that the radiation at temperature T, okay, it's in fact more refined. Okay, that given that we have black body radiation today at temperature T means that even in the early universe, okay, the distribution was a black body distribution. Okay. The only difference would have been this temperature T would have been scaled by this factor of 1 over lambda. So if T naught is a temperature today, then T naught over lambda would have been a temperature in the early universe.
So
Yes, go ahead, please.
at least in like when we study this formula, it is for a black body set at temperature T radiating that much radiation, like with this wavelength and frequency.
Okay, yes.
Like what is that body in the cosmological picture? Like where is the radiation coming from?
Okay, so if you think in terms of statistical mechanics, right? Okay, you don't really need a body. Okay, what you need to derive this formula is to assume that there is sufficient the exchange of energy between the photons. That there is, imagine that the photons were scattering off each other, exchanging energy. Okay, then just from pure statistical mechanics, you could derive this. Okay, because this is what is this? This is a Bose distribution formula, right? Okay, so this is the total amount of phase space volume between nu naught nu and nu plus d nu. Right. So let me say how the formula is derived. Okay, let me go to the next page. So you have this Bose the statistics factor 1 over e to the power h nu over kt minus 1. This is a Bose distribution formula, right?
Yeah.
Then you multiply this. Okay. So suppose you want to now calculate the total number of photons, okay, in the range nu and nu plus delta nu and nu plus d nu. So then you multiply this by the total number of states between nu and nu plus d nu. So this is 4 pi nu square d nu times the volume. Right? This is the volume of a shell of this is the momentum space, right? The volume of a shell of thickness d nu. So 4 pi nu square d nu times volume. So number of photons per unit volume is 4 pi nu square d nu times 1 over e to the power h nu over kt minus 1. Okay. Now there is a mistake in the factor of 2, okay, and that's because we have not counted the fact that for a given momentum there are 2 polarization states of the photon. Okay. So what I should have done here is that I should have multiplied this by 2. Okay, that comes from the polarization. Okay, so let's multiply this also by 2. Okay. And now each photon carries energy h nu. Each photon has energy h nu. Okay. So the energy density in photons in the frequency range nu plus d nu this will be given by h nu times this, and that's exactly that formula. So 4 pi nu square d nu times h nu times 2, this 2 times e to the over to the h nu by kt minus 1. Okay. So what this formula requires, right? No, it's not really a body with which it is interacting, okay, but thermal equilibrium. Okay. Now, normally, because the photons rarely interact with each other, we need a body, right? Because it's in thermal equilibrium with some body. Okay. And such bodies do exist in cosmology, but it's not necessary because photons do have interactions, right? I mean, in QFT, for example, we have seen that the photon, if you take 4 photons, for example, right? They can interact via diagrams like this, right? So the photons can exchange energy by diagrams like this. Okay. So this kind of interaction could exchange energy between photons, okay? But also we'll see in the early universe, okay, there are electrons and positrons, okay, with which photons could easily exchange energy. Okay. So there was indeed a reason why the photons were in thermal equilibrium earlier. Okay. So the explanation of why we are seeing the black body radiation today, okay, is not that today the CMB photons today are in thermal equilibrium. They are not, right? As we said, that they in fact rarely interact with each other. Okay. So they are not in thermal equilibrium. Okay. But this analysis shows that it is not necessary that the photons have to be in thermal equilibrium today. Okay. If they are in thermal equilibrium at some early history, early universe, okay, and if they decoupled, right, they stopped interacting, their interaction rate fell below the expansion rate, okay, then the fact that they are in thermal equilibrium at that time, okay, and as a result we are obeying the black body spectrum at that time, okay, is sufficient to explain why we are seeing the black body temperature, black body spectrum today. Okay, and that is indeed the correct explanation of where the black body distribution comes from. Okay. So a short answer to this question is that the photons were in thermal equilibrium in the early history, both by interacting among themselves as well as interacting with other matter that were present in the early universe.
I was sort of hinting at, like, we don't know where these photons are coming from.
We'll know soon. By the end of today's lecture, we'll see where the photons are coming from. Okay. But they are coming basically, I mean, in short, I have already given the answer, right? That earlier, in the early history, okay, the universe had lots of particles, right? I mean, very, very high temperature, you would have lots of particles, and not just the photons, right? Any particle that could have been produced were produced, okay? And the photons are basically a relic of that era. The thermal equilibrium in the early history of the universe. Does that answer your question, or is it not?
I am used to thinking that there being a source for such radiation, but I'm not sure. Like when we were talking about just expansion and all, we are just assuming that not just assuming, but we are observing that we have photon, matter, and omega r, omega m values that we have observed, and we are just evolving it backwards, the equations.
Yeah, but this is of course the wrong way to do things, right? I mean, you are doing it because that's what we know.
Yeah.
But the right way to do things will be to start with some reasonable assumption as what the universe, how the universe started, okay? And that is the Big Bang cosmology, right? The Big Bang cosmology basically says that the universe started from lambda equal to 0 with an expansion, and at that time it was in thermal equilibrium, okay? Or the soon after lambda equal to 0, it was in thermal equilibrium at a very, very high temperature. Okay? And once you have a very, very high temperature, then anything that could have been produced were produced and were in thermal equilibrium. That includes photons, electrons, positrons, protons, antiprotons, and so on.
So when you say it was produced out of pure vacuum?
Yeah, it was basically, that's the initial condition, thermal equilibrium.
Yeah.
And then you evolve from there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the essence of Big Bang cosmology, right? That once you say that there is thermal equilibrium and the temperature was high, right? then there is no choice. Then thermal equilibrium, all these particles would have been produced out of the vacuum.
Yeah.
So thermal equilibrium will be the starting, will be the key assumption. Okay, and of course you have to check that it's consistent, right? I mean, how do you decide if the thermal equilibrium hypothesis is consistent or not? Okay? That the thing that you have to check, okay, is that given a temperature, okay, you look at the interaction rates, right? How fast the particles would have interacted at that temperature, and that can be figured out just from particle physics. Okay, and as long as the interaction rate was much larger, much faster than the expansion rate, okay, that is enough to say that the universe could have come to thermal equilibrium. Okay. Now, during that process of expansion, sometimes it may happen that for some reason the reaction rates fell below the expansion rate, in which case the universe will go out of thermal equilibrium. Okay. And that is the situation today. Right? Today, the universe is not in thermal equilibrium because the photons are not interacting with anything, right? Mostly not interacting with anything. Nevertheless, okay, the fact that they are in thermal equilibrium earlier, okay, is the cause of this microwave radiation that we are seeing today. And in fact, here I can also mention that the prediction that there should be this microwave radiation, okay, was in fact made before the discovery. Right? Because the Big Bang model is older than the discovery of CMB. And once you accept Big Bang model, that the universe started at lambda equal to 0 at a very, very high temperature, then there is no escape from having a microwave background radiation today, right? Because that during that era, if the photons are in thermal equilibrium, then they have to be there today also.
Why do we use Planck's distribution for photon today?
Why do we use?
We have written P nu naught d nu naught, right? So
Yes.
Those are photons of that we see today.
Yes. So why do you have this today?
And yeah, why do we use this Planck's distribution then?
Yeah. So the point is, this is an observation that today we do have CMB. Okay. But
yeah, the photons that we see, that we are seeing today, are these like photons of today? Or, I mean, they might also be traveling for a long time, right?
yes, indeed, they are traveling for a long time, right? That's why I said that today's photons are not interacting very fast. They're very fast today. So just based on today's observation, okay, there is no reason why you could have said that they should obey black body spectrum, okay, even though they do, right? You can of course measure the distribution because you are observing the photons today, and they do obey black body distribution. But there is no explanation just based on today's physics why they are in that they obey black body distribution, because they are not in equilibrium.
Isn't that like we calculate T naught based on this distribution, no? Like T naught is not a measurable directly.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, I forgot a T naught here. Let me put a 0 here, just 1 minute. Yeah, this was T naught. Yeah. So there are two things. One is that you can observe the photons directly today, right? And you can see how many photons are there in each frequency band. Okay. Based on that observation, we can actually calculate what this P nu naught is, and that's what we find. Okay. That it's consistent with black body distribution at a temperature T naught, okay, which is 2.73 Kelvin. Okay. But then the question is, where did it come from? Okay, why is it black body distribution, even though it's not in thermal equilibrium? Okay. And the answer to that is that even though they are not in thermal equilibrium today, right, they are in thermal equilibrium early in the history of the universe. Okay. And then at some point they decoupled because their reaction rate fell below the expansion rate. Okay. And since then they have not been disturbed. Okay, they have been traveling as undisturbed. Okay. But as long as the starting photons had a black body distribution, right, when they are actually strongly interacting with each other, okay, and with other matter, if they had a black body distribution, okay, and that's consequence of thermal equilibrium, then they would still have a black body distribution today, right? And that's because of this formula. That what you saw here, okay, is that okay, you can reverse this formula, right? Here I have said that given the black body that they obey black body distribution today, they had to obey black body distribution in the early universe. But you can reverse this. If in the early universe they had black body distribution, then based on that you can calculate what the distribution would be today, and it would be black body. Okay, with a scale temperature. So what I'm saying,
this argument we are making because we are saying that if so the photons within the energy range has some energy density, that energy density won't change. The total amount of energy in that region won't change even if the frequencies change.
yes, indeed. And that is the case if the photons don't interact with each other, right?
Not also with any other matter.
Not also with any other matter. Exactly.
Yeah. So we are making that assumption, right?
Yeah, and that is true. That is true based on today's observation, right? Because the matter is so thin today, right? That the black, I mean, this we'll discuss in a little more detail later, right? That the photons that we observe today are in fact the ones that were emitted at lambda equal to 10 to the minus 3. Okay, since then, I mean, most of the microwave photons that we are observing today came from an era when lambda was 10 to the minus 3. So since then, the photons haven't scattered. They haven't exchanged energy with anything. So as long as at lambda equal to 10 to the minus 3, the photons are in thermal equilibrium, they will be in thermal equilibrium today. They will look like as if they are obey thermal distribution today, even though they are not in strict thermal equilibrium because they are not exchanging energies. Is this point clear?
Yeah. And one more thing, once we make the assumption that photons do not interact with any other matter, then the only option left is gravity, right?
Exactly.
And gravity is only changing the frequency of these photons.
Exactly. Gravity is changing the frequency of the photons and also the energy density, right? This is 1 over lambda to the 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what gravity is doing is well understood, right? I mean, that energy density gets scaled by 1 over lambda to the 4 and the frequencies change. That's what we are seeing here. And that effect, so what this is saying is that the effect of gravity on a black body distribution is only to change the temperature, but not change the distribution. Okay, that's one of the key features that we are going to use. Okay, and that is in fact the key reason why today's microwave background is black body radiation. Okay, otherwise there is no reason for it to be a black body radiation. Is it okay? Are there further questions? Okay. So now let's try to reconstruct the history of the universe a little bit. Based on this T equal to T naught over lambda. Okay. So at lambda EQ, remember lambda EQ was about 10 to the minus 4. That's where the matter and radiation energy densities are equal. Okay. So that time T would have been T naught times 10 to the 4. Okay. So that's 2.73 times 10 to the 4. Okay. But a more useful measure is not T but KBT. So KBT is like 8.64 times 10 to the minus 5 EV per K times this is in Kelvin, 2.73 times 10 to the 4 Kelvin. Okay. So that's roughly 10 to the minus 1, and this gives you about 16. So that's roughly 1 electron volt, a little more than 1 electron volt. Okay. At lambda 10 times smaller, 10 to the minus 4, minus 5. KBT would have been about 10 electron volt. Now recall that the hydrogen ionizes at 13.6 electron volt. So this says that for lambda much smaller than 10 to the minus 5, hydrogen would have been ionized. Would have been ionized. Namely, that we will have E minus and P separately instead of H. For smaller lambda, helium would have been ionized. And of course, you can go on like this, right? So let me go on a little bit more to see what kind of physics we can get. So let me, okay, so let's put that number again. So lambda equal to 10 to the minus 4 implies kBt of order an electron volt, right? That's what you saw. Okay. So lambda, say 10 to the 6 times smaller, lambda equal to 10 to the power minus 4 times 10 to the power minus 6. At this lambda, kBt would have been a million electron volt, MeV. Now, let me remind you the electron mass is about 0.51 MeV. Okay. So at this temperature, this kind of PR production would have been possible. Okay. So at this temperature, essentially, there will be a gas of E plus, E minus, and photon, plus a few He and hydrogen nuclei. And so on. And you can, of course, keep going higher and higher temperature, right? At higher temperature, so at very high temperature, okay, say of order, when kBt is of order of 100 GeV, all the standard model particles would have been present. Okay. So this essentially is what leads to the Big Bang hypothesis. Okay. And namely that when the universe started, so the universe started at small lambda, lambda close to 0, lambda almost 0, and at high temperature greater than about 100 GeV in thermal equilibrium. Okay. And from there on, it has been evolving, okay, doing various things. Okay. And as long as you understand the microscopic physics, okay, which you more or less understand up to 100 GeV, right? So up to 100 GeV, microscopic physics is given by the standard model. For microscopic physics, is well understood. And hence we can follow the history. We can follow the evolution of the universe. And the various events that happened. Okay. Now, of course, for us, the thing of interest, the things of interest, the events of interest, will be the ones which have their consequences today. Okay. And we'll see various of these events that has consequences today, right? For example, the neutrino production, neutrino radiation, right? That will be one of the predictions that we'll find of this Big Bang hypothesis. Okay. Then the other important prediction is nucleosynthesis. Okay, this is the formation of nuclei. Of course, when the universe began, it began with a soup of quarks and gluons, right? That's what forms the basis of the Standard Model. Okay. But as it cooled, the protons and neutrons formed, and then protons and neutrons got bound into nuclei. Okay. And because we understand the microscopic physics, we can in fact predict exactly how it happened. Okay. And one of the predictions that will be coming up with is the abundance of light elements, right? What will be the ratio of hydrogen to helium today? Right? We'll see that can be predicted based on the microscopic physics that you understand, okay? And the starting point, okay, that the universe started when in thermal equilibrium. And one point here, okay, which I should emphasize is that the physics beyond 100 GeV is not understood, because we don't know what happens at energies higher than 100 GeV, right? We have not tested. Physics beyond 100 GeV is not known. Which in turn implies that we do not quite know how the universe was for KBT larger than 100 GeV. Okay. But most of it is not relevant. Most of it since the information gets washed out during thermal equilibrium. Okay, so the universe might have been doing various things, but once it comes to thermal equilibrium at some intermediate temperature, then most of what happened earlier is lost, right? Because the thermal equilibrium has washed out that information. Okay. However, few details survive. Okay, and these few details could give us clue about the earlier history. Okay, and we'll see some of these details as we go on. Okay, are there questions?
One thing, like
Yes.
in statistical mechanics, like you were describing that one can achieve at like get at the Planck's distribution purely through statistical mechanics.
Yes.
There is no need for a explicit source in which establishes the equilibrium.
Yes.
Like in statistical mechanics, the temperature that we usually talk about is it's somewhat the temperature of the bath degrees of freedom. Like
Ah,
it is some average of whatever is not part of our system in consideration.
yeah, but you don't have to think of it that way, right? I mean, you can have microcanonical ensemble, for example, right? Where you use statistical mechanics on an isolated system.
Yeah, but even there, the temperature is an external input in some sense.
No, the temperature is derived from energy density, right?
I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but
See, if you have a microcanonical ensemble,
yeah,
and if you assume ergodicity, that there is exchange of energy in the inside the microcanonical ensemble, right?
okay,
Then you fix the total energy, okay? But it behaves as if it's a thermal system at a given temperature, right? If you look at now, okay, so the point is the following: take a microcanonical ensemble, okay, and take a small subsystem of this. Okay? This subsystem is exchanging energy with the rest, right? Which you can think of as a bath.
yeah,
And there is a notion of temperature that comes out of that analysis, right? That
Yeah.
is the derivative of the 1 over T is the derivative of the entropy with respect to the energy. So it's that energy, that temperature that you're talking about here, right? The 1 over the del S del E.
So are you saying that like I mean I'm not sure why we need a notion of temperature for these sort of quantities like why do we not refer to the cosmic microwave background by its wavelength or frequency instead of temperature?
We can,
Like-
except that I'm giving the otherwise you have to give the whole distribution, right? So it's a much more efficient way of specifying the cosmic microwave background radiation to say by saying that it's a black body radiation at temperature T, at temperature T naught, right? Instead, then that automatically tells us what the full distribution is.
Yeah, but here since there is no like quote unquote black body to start with, there is no like object to which this temperature can be assigned to.
No, it's the temperature of the radiation itself. Right? You don't need a black body. You don't need a wall, right? I mean, you can take the infinite. You can take the infinite volume limit, right? When the walls have gone away to infinity, you still have the notion of a temperature, right? And that's it. If you think of this as a gas of photons, right?
Yeah.
A photon gas, right? Normally, when you think of a gas, right, you don't give the walls too much importance, right? Even though the gas may be actually thermally equilibrating by exchanging energy with the walls, also with each other.
Yeah.
But you assign the temperature to the gas itself, right? So similarly, you think of the black body radiation as a gas of photons, and the temperature you assign to the photons themselves, right? You don't need the wall with which it's exchanging energy.
Okay, but
Yeah.
I think there are like multiple notions of temperature just in statistical physics. Like there is a bath, there might not be a bath. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you think of this as a microcanonical system, right? You have the energy density, right? And that's enough to define the temperature because you define 1 over T is del S del E, the rate of change of entropy with respect to energy.
All right.
So that definition will be good enough for our purpose.
Okay.
Are the other questions? Okay, so of the various events, one of the events that is of immediate consequence, one of the events is what is called the surface of is the last scattering of the CMB photons. Okay. Now we saw that at lambda of order 10 to the minus 5, KBT was of order 10 electron volt, right? So as lambda went above 10 to the minus 5, the photon energy fell below ionization energy. Okay, hydrogen ionization energy, okay, which would indicate that the E minus and P, which are freely floating till then, okay, at a high temperature, okay, will combine to hydrogen. Okay. But the actual procedure, in fact, is much more complicated, and we need detailed statistical analysis. Okay, which we will be doing later. Okay. But roughly the point is the following, that when something is energetically possible doesn't mean that it happens immediately, right? I mean, what one really needs is to look at the free energy and see whether it's favorable free energetically to have E minus and P combined to H. And typically what one finds is the E minus P system has much more entropy compared to the bound system. Okay. So even when the temperature has fallen below 13.6 electron volt, okay, and it's possible for the E minus and P to bind, okay, they actually do not bind, okay, because it's entropically favorable for them to remain as free particles. Okay. So detailed analysis, okay, shows that actual H formation occurs around lambda of order 10 to the minus 3. Okay. So this we'll see later. Okay, for now let's assume we'll see later. Okay. For now we'll assume this and proceed. Okay. So this you will recognize is well into the matter dominated era. Is well into the matter dominated era. Okay. Matter dominated era starts at 10 lambda of order 10 to the minus 4, right? That's lambda larger than 10 to the minus 4. So we are at least 10 times larger than the starting of the matter dominated era. So there is a clear distinction between the universe at lambda less than 10 to the minus 3. Okay, here the E minus and P existed as free particles. Okay. And as a result, the photons scattered off. Because these are charged particles, right? And photons, of course, interact with charged particles. Okay, so when E minus and P had existed as free particles, the photons would have scattered often. But for lambda larger than 10 to the minus 3, hydrogen atom formed. And essentially the universe became transparent to the photons. Okay, which basically means that gammas scattered infrequently. And how infrequently one can see by noting that today most of the CMP radiation comes from the lambda of order -3 period. Okay. So most of the CMB photons that we see today, okay, last scattered at lambda equal to 10 to the -3. After that, they have been traveling without any scattering. Is this clear? So based on this, one introduces a notion of last scattering surface. Okay, the definition of last scattering surface is the following. Okay, that suppose we are at r equal to 0, okay, theta equal to phi equal to 0. The CMB photons that we see today came from, say, r theta phi. Let's call it RL theta phi for different theta phi, right? As you look in different directions, of course, theta and phi will be different. But all the CMB photons, since lambda is fixed, okay, they would have come from the same distance, okay, same co-moving distance from us today. Okay. And you can also write down the formula for RL. So what is RL? Okay, so RL is the distance that the photons have traveled from the time of last scattering till today. So that's basically the horizon today, RH at lambda equal to 1 minus RH at lambda equal to lambda L. Right? Because this difference is telling us the distance that the photons travel, okay, from the last scattering till today. So the surface at R equal to RL is called the last scattering surface. Okay. Are there questions? Is it clear? Okay. So now let me just state a few observations, okay, and then I'll stop. So observation is that the last scattering surface is highly uniform. Okay, now what exactly does that mean by highly uniform? So basically the statement is the following, that the photons that arrive from different directions have almost the same temperature, Okay, that's 2.73 Kelvin. Okay. But there is a small fluctuation. That's about 1 part in 10 to the 5. Okay, that means the variation, the ratio of the variation to the actual amplitude is 10 to the minus 5. Okay. So there are these small fluctuations. Okay. And in fact, these small fluctuations, like the CMB itself, these are also predicted before they are observed. Okay, so I'll just explain how they are predicted and then I'll stop for today. So the point is that the CMB gives an image of the universe at lambda equal to lambda L, which is about 10 to the minus 3. Okay, so let's call that the value of lambda at the time of last scattering. Okay. And the corresponding, okay, with TL, maybe next time we'll write down the formula for TL. Okay, the time of last scattering, that's about 400,000 years, but we'll see how to derive this. Okay. So it gives an image of the universe at this lambda. Okay. And the small fluctuations in temperature, fluctuations in T, basically corresponds to small fluctuation in the gravitational field. Now suppose there are no fluctuations.
Sir,
Yes, go ahead, please.
fluctuation in gravitational field, I mean, from what does it come?
Okay, we'll see from where it comes. Okay, but this is what it implies. The fact that there is small fluctuation in T, right, means that there would have been small fluctuations also in the gravitational field. Everything would have fluctuated, right? Because once the energy density gets fluctuates, then the gravitational field also would have fluctuated. Okay, that's one way of saying this. Where it comes is something that we'll study later. But I'm just trying to say, indicate how it was predicted that the such fluctuations must be there.
Okay.
Okay, so let's suppose what would have happened if there are no fluctuations. No fluctuations means that completely homogeneous universe, right? Completely homogeneous universe. Now, if you start with a completely homogeneous universe, it will evolve into a completely homogeneous universe. Okay, that's the FRW metric, right? And this will in turn imply that there will be no structure like galaxies and stars. Okay, that of course is going to be inconsistent with what we see, right? We see structure, we see galaxies and stars. Okay. So one can reverse this. One can reverse this argument. and essentially show that in order to explain the structure that we see in the universe, there must have been of order at least 1 in 10 to the 5 at lambda equal to -3, 10 to the -3. In other words, if there are fluctuations of this order, 1 in 10 to the 5, right? Say 10 to the -5, say h mu nu fluctuated of like 10 to the -5, or g mu nu fluctuated by 10 to the -5. Okay, then one can evolve the equations forward, okay, by using Einstein's equation, and show that by the time you have come to lambda of order 1, okay, that's today, okay, those small fluctuations, okay, would have grown, okay, because in gravity has this feature that if there are small fluctuations, if there is a little overdense region of matter, then because gravity is attractive, those overdense regions tend to grow. Okay. So a small fluctuation can grow into large ones. Okay. But of course, if there is no fluctuation, it will not grow into anything. Okay, and what one can show based on these simple calculations was that we need at least 1 in 10 to the 5 fluctuation at lambda equal to 10 to the -3 in order that they grow into the kind of fluctuations that are needed to produce stars and galaxies. Okay. So this is the way it was predicted first, that there must have been such fluctuations in CMB. And this was eventually observed, in fact, after a long wait by the Kobe satellite. Okay, but that's, as I said, much later, much after it was actually predicted. Okay. So I think I'll stop here today. Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow night. Okay, and we'll have more to say about these fluctuations at that time. Okay, and the various properties of these fluctuations. Are there questions?
Isn't the statement on isotropy rather than homogeneity, like one in the case of experiment, like?
Yeah, it's isotropy from our point of view, right? But if you think in from the point of view of the universe, right? We are looking at different regions of the universe, right? As we are looking in different directions, right? And we are saying that these different regions of the universe all existed in the same temperature.
Also, this number that you're saying was predicted, was it the same with this 1 in 10 to the 5 which
Yeah,
was
it
observed?
was shown that you need at least 1 in 10 to the 5. So Kobe
The number would have been
pushed it to the limit, right? So if the Kobe didn't find it, then there will be definite contradiction.
Yeah, but on what basis is the number predicted? Because we only know of structure in the sense of galaxies and all and stars.
Yes. So what
So
we do,
using-
let's imagine that the fluctuation was like 1 in 10 to the 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then starting from that, you can now run the equations of motion forward. Okay. Just Einstein's equation, of course, complicated because it's not uniform anymore, right? But
Yeah.
you can put it on a computer and run it forward, or you can do some numerical analysis by hand, and you can ask how much would have been the fluctuation, how much would have those fluctuations grown by the time lambda reaches of order 1. Okay, when the
And that should be what is today. Like if we start with 1 in 10 to the 5, on evolving it, we should get some number which is, I don't know what the number is today, but whatever that number is.
yeah. So the point today, of course, you cannot use this language because the fluctuations are of order 1, right? So you have already entered what is called a nonlinear regime. Okay. So when the fluctuations are so small, right, 1 in 10 to the 5, okay, then one can do a linear analysis. One can just use linearized Einstein's equation, okay, to see how they are going to evolve. Okay. And what we need is that by order lambda equal to 1, right, these fluctuations would have grown to at least some order 1, right?
Yeah.
1 in 1. And then they enter nonlinear regime where the analysis becomes much more complicated. Okay. But if we find that if we start with 1 in 10 to the 6, right, then you will find that at lambda equal to 1, these fluctuations still remain very small, right? Say 1 in 10 or 1 in 100. And that's certainly inconsistent with what we see today, right? The kind of fluctuations that you see today, right? The galaxies or the stars, the density inside the stars or the galaxies versus the density in the intergalactic medium. That ratio is huge.
Yeah.
So those kinds of fluctuations you would not obtain today if you start from anything less than 1 in 10 to the 5.
Could you also refer to that paper, like maybe tell the name so I can search?
Okay, this paper I'll try to find out. I think it's a work of many people, right? But I'll try to find out and I'll let you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
also,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I had a question on QFT, but maybe you could stop the recording.
Okay, yeah. So what I was going to say that this can also be one of the projects. I mean, I think, eventually I'll want each of you to do a project at the end, right? That will be part of the course. And this could be one possible topic, right? This is not something that will be covering in the course very much, right? That starting from the CMB fluctuations, how the structures form. Okay, that's post the last scattering, right? This course will be mainly the history of the universe up to last scattering, okay, but not after last scattering. So this could be one of the projects, right? That how the fluctuations grow from the time of last scattering to today. Okay, so are there any questions on this? Or anything else in today's lecture?
Not directly related. I was asking about this cosmological constant. I mean, do we associate the reason for the value of cosmological constant to some quantum field, or is there something else, like something like spontaneous symmetry variance?
Yeah, see, it's not known, right? Right now, this origin of the cosmological constant is ill understood. Okay, there are various models, including in string theory, but I think the question is not settled. Okay, it could come from the fluctuations, the vacuum energy of quantum fields, or some classical energy of from spontaneous symmetry breaking. Many things, it could come from any different effects. And nothing is really certain about this, the origin of the cosmological constant.
Okay. I mean, had it been because of some quantum field, there would be some associated particle with that field, right?
Yes, see, all of the
like
all
we
the
associate
field, right?
some.
Yes, typically the fluctuations
Yeah,
of any
like we
quantum field.
associate some particle.
Yeah, so say we have, I mean, even the known particles, they produce cosmological constant, right? Their vacuum fluctuation will produce cosmological constant, right? The electrons or the Higgs particles or the W bosons, everything produces, the vacuum fluctuation produces cosmological constant. This is 0 point energy, right? And that's typically huge. So from that viewpoint, the puzzle is not why we have cosmological constant, but the puzzle would be why you don't have a cosmological constant that's much larger than what you see, right? The typical scale of the cosmological constant in the natural units will be like 1, right? 1 in natural units. Whereas if we actually translate today's cosmological constant in natural units, it's like 10 to the minus 120. So and that's essentially the main difficulty in explaining the cosmological constant, because the natural value is much larger than what you observe. So it's not hard to find the origin of the cosmological constant, right? It's hard to explain why it is so small. And that,
I mean, had it been due to the fluctuations in the vacuum, would it make sense to write equation of state for that energy? I mean,
yeah, it would,
we wrote
because
something like rho equals minus p.
yeah, you can, because even whatever be the origin, right? What you are asking is whether in the sense of expectation value, what is the relationship between the T00 and Tij? right? And that question certainly makes sense even if it's coming from the quantum fluctuations, right? Because ultimately, you're talking about the relationship between the expectation value of the defined components of the energy quantum tensor.
Okay. But that fluctuation has to be very large because I mean we know that the matter component of this total energy density is very small, and the corresponding component for cosmological constant is very large. So
Yeah, so, see, true. But the point is that it's very large, but it's actually very small in natural units. Right? If you take, for example, the electron, right, and find the vacuum energy contribution due to the fluctuation of the electron, it's actually divergent. Right? We had seen in quantum field theory that if you look at the 0-point energy of oscillators, right, that diverges. Right? And the natural cutoff scale for the divergence is the Planck scale, right, which will give a cosmological constant of order 1 in natural units. But the actual observed cosmological constant, right, it's of course large compared to the matter density. Okay? But when you actually translate to the natural units, right, it's like 10 to the minus 120. This you can check, right? You can easily convert the observed value of the cosmological constant into natural units using the fact that it's the cosmological constant is actually the T00 component, right, energy density. Okay. So put the natural units and you will find that it's 10 to the minus 120. So that's the problem in explaining cosmological constant, right? Why is it so small? Right? It's as if there are many large quantities that are cancelling each other, okay, and giving eventually a small value.
okay.
Regarding what you said, if we don't even put a cutoff scale, all fields will give a divergent result, right?
Yes. They would.
And cutoff is not like, at least in QFT, it is not natural. Like,
Yeah, in QFT it's not natural. In string theory it is natural. Meaning there's also an inbuilt cutoff, right? You don't have to do any cutoff. It automatically gets cut off. You get a finite result. But the finite result, in absence of supersymmetry, which you don't have in our universe anyway, the finite result is of the order of the Planck scale, is 1 in natural units.
okay.
So it's in that sense I said that the natural scale of cosmological constant is 1 in natural units, whereas the observed is a 10 to the minus 120 in natural units.
Yeah. Also, like maybe you can switch off the recording now.
Okay. So I'm switching it off, assuming no other question for this.